So where are we today, Bill?
Well, Rick, we are in South Tamworth, New Hampshire, and we're at the Riverside Cemetery, and we are visiting Virgil White, who you probably all know about him, but you really don't know about him.
I think that's right. Well, anybody that's a native of this area remembers White's Garage.
Yep.
I mean, even as a kid, I remember White's Garage. It's down there off of 16 and 113, right?
Yeah, it's right near where the Indian Mound Golf Course is, right in there, right? That same area? Or was it further up?
No, it was up further.
A little further up.
It was up. Okay. It's up where, almost to where you go towards Meredith in there.
Ah, okay.
It's right on the corner going to our house.
Oh,
on the lake. What ends up on the lake road.
Okay, all right. Now I know.
And right
did
now
burn down, right?
The original one did. Yeah. Later on, there was a Ford dealership there. Oddly, not so oddly, I guess. But that was right after we got back from living in Germany. That was there, but it was modern, obviously. Yeah. But White's Garage was a landmark. Mm-hmm. Even when I lived in Conway as a kid, when we went by White's Garage, I used to know, okay, we're getting home.
Yeah.
But anyway, why are we here looking at Virgil White? Well, there's probably some, it's open to discussion whether what we're about to say is the absolute truth. But certainly, this man was one of, if not the first, which many claim he is, but the first man to at least, or one of the first in any case, to invent the snowmobile. Yeah. Now, how did he do that? Well, he was a Ford dealer way back when, and he sold Model T Fords, which were called flivvers. Yeah. And they were actually kind of a neat automobile in the sense that the way they were built back in those days, you could actually, it was versatile, let's put it that way. And what you could do is jack up the rear end, and then you could remove one tire. Yeah. Bill knows this stuff because he's really into cars. You could make
it into a power takeoff.
Make it into a lumber mill. Yeah. A mill, a milling for a grain miller. Yeah.
I would wager that there were several rope tows here in the area that were powered by Model T engines.
Yep, I actually remember skiing on some of those many years ago. But there was one real problem with that, and the big problem with them was that they were great in the summer. But what about the winter?
Yeah, that was the problem. Little skinny tires.
Yeah.
They're prone to getting stuck.
So if you had a flivver back in those days, you could drive that, in this area, maybe May into maybe in October, maybe a little part of November. And then back in those days, you'd probably put it on blocks for the winter.
Yeah, that's exactly what they did. You just put them up for the winter in the barn.
Yeah, I even remember doing that with the camp truck my dad had way back when he was a director for a local camp. But, when you get right down to it, that sense, it was approximately 6 months of the year couldn't use this thing. So it dawned on Mr. White that basically there might be a way to make this thing go on the snow. So what he did, because of the versatility of this, he put, just like today, 2 skis on the front, and then basically in the back he made heavy-duty wheels that would accept Caterpillar type tracks.
Yeah, the track on it.
So
just like a modern.
And he even made some of them with slightly different tracks, excuse me, so they could use them in sand or deep sand or something, mud, whatever. But anyway, he was the guy who copyrighted the name Snowmobile.
Yeah.
That much we're sure of.
Yeah, that really cinches the deal, is because he did patent or copyright the name Snowmobile. And hence, he is the creator of the snowmobile.
Yes, in that sense. Now, somebody else was probably out there working on something similar. But as far as we're concerned, coming from New Hampshire, this is the guy.
Yeah. I think it was a little while ago, but the town of Ossipee, all the banners in the town had home of the snowmobile.
Yeah.
And I still think there's a sign coming into Ossipee on Route 16 that says home of the snowmobile.
Okay, if Ossipee says that,
Yeah, so that's gotta be.
I think we've got the town of Ossipee behind us. Actually, one of those snowmobiles, believe it or not, was part of, do you have any idea whose funeral it might have been?
Oh, I don't know.
No? Calvin Coolidge's.
No kidding.
So, you know, that obviously it was well enough known at that point that somebody said, okay, let's use it at Calvin's funeral. White sold 70 of these from 1923 to 1924. And he eventually sold the rights to a firm called Farm Specialty Manufacturing Company. And they produced 3,300 of them a year. And until the factory burned. It was never rebuilt. But of course, these were incredibly popular with doctors.
Yes.
People that needed to get around in the winter.
Milkmen.
I don't think they were used that much, although someone had to, because they had to have been fun.
Yeah.
You know, but I don't think they were marketed so much as, you know, something that is like today, that is almost a sport in itself.
Yeah, it wasn't a recreation vehicle.
Recreation
It was,
vehicle.
Utilitarian.
So, I mean, other people have obviously taken that same concept, and now we have what we call the modern snowmobile. And that's basically the story of the snowmobile. Now, the other thing I'm guessing at, and I think it's a pretty solid guess. I mean, he's listed here on this plaque as being a very important citizen, but he was also from the Office of Motor Vehicles and Commissioner for the state of New Hampshire for motor vehicles. So obviously he was a dealer, he dealt with Fords, but he was also working in Concord, the beginning of the Department of Motor Vehicles, I would say. And he's being remembered here for that, not for the snowmobile, interestingly enough, but he is being remembered for that. So Virgil, sounds like you were pretty industrious, clever, entrepreneurial type of guy.
He was an old Yankee when he was commissioner.
Yeah.
He during World War II, he was the commissioner of motor vehicles, and he had the state reuse the plates and only use one. So you know that he was a Yankee.
He was a Yankee. All right.
Smart mover.
So he was a good Yankee too.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, we found him right here in it's called Riverside Cemetery. It's in South Tamworth, and it's not too far from the gate.
Yep.
And if you want to give Virgil a visit, there's a couple of other stones we're going to look at here. One of them is a Civil War veteran. We'll tell you a little bit about him when we get there. And the other is an interesting stone that was recommended to us because it has a very interesting, what do you call it, engraving on the side of the stone. And we'll talk about that when we get there. So anyway, Virgil.
Yes.
Rest in peace.
Rest in peace.
Well, we're still in the Riverside Cemetery. This one we sort of found, but not sort of, we found by accident.
Yes.
Well, you want to tell us about it?
Well, I think it's obviously a young man, 19 years old, that was killed in the Civil War.
Yep.
at the Battle of Antietam. And we just looked it up to be sure, but apparently he died on the first day of battle.
That's right.
I know Rick and I kind of said it in one of our little stories that we've always been drawn to Civil War monuments, and a lot of them tell fascinating stories, and this one does. And you can probably read it better than I can.
Well, basically what it says is this is the young man who basically went when it was a Northern victory, and he was the man who pulled down the flag, the Confederate flag, at Antietam. I'm assuming, the way that it's written, that may have been, well, it was apparently at the beginning because it was that first day.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the date of his death is the date of the beginning of the Battle of Antietam. So he did die young, but apparently did die as a hero.
As a quite heroic, yes.
Yeah.
It's just another one of those tragic stories of the Civil War, and there were so many, of course, on both sides.
Yeah.
And thousands and thousands of young men didn't come home. And it's interesting, too. I do know that a great many Union soldiers in particular, you could pay to have a body returned. But so many of them are just a monument. They're not there. You know, they're not buried there. They're buried in the national cemeteries at those battlefields. But I'm guessing that you know, he probably was brought home. His family had enough money to have him, you know, returned home, and he's buried here in his hometown.
Yeah, and I mean, it's possible we're wrong about that, but it doesn't look like a cenotaph. It looks like it's an actual stone.
Yes, I believe that's true.
And like so many, his life was cut short. Still amazing to me when I think about it, you know, that up here you go all the way down, in this case to Antietam, and that people would, you know, the men would sign up to do that in those days. I mean, you would just think it was so far away that they might go, what has this got to do with us? And yet they did, you know, they did see the necessity to join and go. Yeah.
Well, the abolition movement was very, very strong, especially in the churches.
Yeah.
And everybody in those days went to church. And so no doubt, if nothing else, of patriotism, he might have been, or very well was, a very strong abolitionist.
Yep, could be. Well, Robert, rest in peace.
Yes, and thank you for your service.
Thank you for your service, yes. Well, what are we doing at this grave?
Well, this one is your story, but it's pretty cool.
Well,
apparently the Perkins family were quite proud of their cemetery and wanted to keep it that way.
Well, I think it was very important to Mr. Pike C. Perkins that this cemetery remain in good condition. And I kind of hope I'm reading this correctly. This was referred to us by Henry and Maureen Spencer, who used to live in Effingham and now live in Rockland. And Henry actually is really a very talented goldsmith.
Yes.
And a fly fisherman.
Yes, and a fly fisherman, of course.
Not mention that. But anyway, Mr. Pike, or Mr. Perkins, I'm sorry, raised apparently around $1,800, which quite a bit of money in those days.
Sizable fortune, I would
And
think.
the idea was to improve the cemetery and to keep all of this in good condition. He set it up so there would be like $100 a year that came from interest that could be used to, I believe, take care of this area we're standing on, because when Henry told me the story, he was going, well, that guy was apparently worried that his gravesite and so on wouldn't be taken care of. Yeah. So he was going to make sure that the money was put up to do it.
Carved in stone.
Carved in stone, and it was finished apparently with the fencing that goes around here, on March 16th in 1912.
It is probably one of the most impressive family plots in the cemetery,
Yeah.
with all the stonework that's here, and a wonderful center stone.
Yep. So apparently, I mean, he was obviously civic-minded and cared about the entire cemetery. But I think Henry was onto something too when he mentioned that probably he was concerned about his family burial plots were well taken care of. Rest in peace, Pike, and all of your family.
Yeah, Mr. Perkins and all your family.
All right.